lên, lên, lên. Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for finding us. I hope you are doing well. I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you be like Hong Kong cinema, girls with guns movies, action movies, heroic bloodshed, boutique Blu-ray labels, Blu-ray reviews, and all that other fun stuff. If you do like all of those things, you are not subscribed to the channel, and you could subscribe to the channel. It would be much appreciated. Obviously, no pressure, only if you feel like doing it, but it does help the channel quite a bit. I want to give a quick shout out to our patrons. Without Patreon, this channel would not operate in the way in which it does. I bought the Bruce Lee set with Patreon money. I bought the Twin Dragons release from 88 Films, which is a pre-order. Obviously, that's not out yet. Patreon money, the Fight Back to School set, all the Vinegar Syndrome releases that you see me talking about, I have bought with Patreon money. A lot of other stuff. So you, the YouTube viewer, get a lot out of the contributions of the people in Patreon. So a huge shout out to them and a big thanks to them. You can join for $2 a month, $5 a month, only if you feel like it. Obviously, no pressure, but it does really help the channel. And I do, I try to put one piece of unique content in Patreon every week, and then there will occasionally be like other odds and ends that I put in there as well. But I do exclusive movie reviews, wicked early release stuff, lists, like my list of my 10 favorite heroic bloodshed movies was a wicked early release in Patreon, so that came out months in Patreon before it came out here. Anyway, enough plugging of the Patreon. I am really excited to talk to you about the movie that I just watched. This was my first time seeing this film, and it blew me the frick away. Like, okay, She Shoots Straight is the movie, okay? This is the Eureka press release that they sent me, because I know people sometimes like to like see these because they're just like fun. So thanks to Eureka for sending me the press release. This movie is amazing. Like, this movie is amazing. I'm going to go on record and say a controversial statement. This is my new favorite Yuen movie. I like this movie more than Yes, Madam. I liked it more than Righting Wrongs. My Father is a Hero is my favorite Jet Li movie. I haven't watched that movie in like 8 years, so I'm not really considering that. I'm just thinking about like the Yuen movies I've watched recently with these new Blu-ray releases and stuff. Like, this movie blew me away. So let me give you the info about the movie. Let me talk to you briefly about the release that is coming out from Eureka Entertainment, September 18th of 2023, a Region B release. And then I'm going to dive into my thoughts on this movie because I have a lot to say about it. It's amazing. I can't believe I've never seen this movie before. I know I say that all the time, like with Skyhawk and with A Moment of Romance. It's fantastic freaking movies that just came out on Blu-ray. And I gave like rave reviews to them and stuff like, but this might be my favorite Hong Kong first watch of this movie, or of this year, excuse me. I kind of think it is. Of 2023, the Hong Kong movies that I have seen for the first time, I think this is my favorite. Like, this movie is incredible. Okay. It also very much appeals like to my taste, but let's talk about the release, and then I'm like turning into Woody Allen. I'm like rambling so much. I'm not actually turning into Woody Allen. This is a very important point to make. This movie ran from the 7th of April until the 27th of April of 1990. It made about 10 million Hong Kong dollars in the box office. Like I said, it was directed by Yuen, it was produced by Sammo Hung, and it was written by Barry Wong and Yuen Kai-chi, and it stars Joyce Godenzi, Karina Lau, Yuen Wah, Tony Leung, Ka-Fai, Sarah Lee, Angela Leung, Sandra Ng, and Sammo Hung is in it, and then others who you'll recognize if you've seen a lot of films from this era, because a lot of like the regular people kind of pop up. The Eureka Entertainment release has a limited to 2000 special edition run that has artwork by Darren Wheeling, which is in a slipcase, and then reversible artwork on the sleeve and everything. And then there's an essay from James Oliver, and the essay is really interesting because there's a lot of behind the scenes gossip drama about this movie. So Sammo Hung in 1995 married Joyce Godenzi, who's the lead in this film. She had also been in Eastern Condors, and she was in Paper Marriage, actually, also with Sammo. So she wasn't married to him when they made this movie. She was married to somebody else. But I guess there's a lot of like tabloid gossip in Hong Kong where people believe they actually got together on Eastern Condors and were together on this movie, and then eventually she got divorced and they got married. So it's a really interesting behind the scenes stuff about this film. So if you want to learn more about this movie and about that kind of behind the scenes gossipy type of stuff, I would highly recommend checking out the limited edition release, because you get the booklet that'll have all that information in it. I'm gonna briefly tell you the bonus material on here so you know what you're getting when you get this set. Excuse me very much for that. And then I'm going to get into my thoughts on the movie. So there's a really fantastic locations video from Crazy from Kong, which is, Arna Venema and his various collaborators. And it's just a really cool video because they go to the locations today. They talk about it's Arna is like the host of it. It's 12 minutes long. And so like, if you've seen the film, the opening scene is a wedding. So they're in front of this church. So Arna goes to the church and you can see like a tree that's in the movie that's now huge, right? Like 33 years later, this tree has grown, and the church is on this big hill. You don't really see that as much in the movie. So one of the things I really like about these location videos is that you see like the context around the location, so you can kind of see how it fits in the city, and it changes the way that you would kind of perceive it from how they're shooting it in the film. It's just a really cool video. There's a couple trailers on here. I think the Hong Kong and the English trailer. So Valerie So interview. This is about 7 minutes long, and she's a professor of Asian American Studies at San Francisco State University. And she talks about like the female characters in the film. She talks about kind of the girls with guns and like female kind of led films in general in Hong Kong from that period. She talks about the audiences, what audience expectations were, what sets this film apart from other girls with guns films, why she believes that material might be in there, what kind of audience members it might appeal to, what it means like culturally and stuff like that. It's really, really interesting little analysis of the film that I really appreciated. And then you have two fantastic commentary tracks on here. Frank Jang and Mike and Arna, they are excellent. I highly recommend that if you get this release, you listen to them, because you'll learn a lot about the people in the movie, about the context of the making of the film, and all of the cultural and historical and social stuff, like related to the film and the cast and the crew and everything like that. Like really amazing commentaries as always from the all-star crew there. So now, let me get into my thoughts on this movie, because this is like my new favorite movie. Like I loved this movie. And so the opening scene is really, really good. It's a wedding, right? Like I said, Joyce Godenzi's character is marrying the Tony Leung Ka-Fai character. The Tony Leung Ka-Fai character comes from a family of cops. He's got, I think, 4 sisters who are all cops. He's a cop. He's marrying a cop in the Joyce Godenzi character, and his dad was a cop, but the dad passed away years ago. The dad was like, he was like an important person in the police force. Like a lot of the other characters in the film knew the dad, were mentored by him and stuff like that. So they're like this big police family. And there's just so many fascinating dynamics. The characters in this movie are so good, and they're so grounded, and the complexity of their relationships is so well handled, and the acting is freaking incredible. So in the opening scene, we meet the family. Right away, we learn that the sisters, especially the Karina Lau character, but the sisters of the Tony Leung Ka-Fai character, they don't like the Joyce Godenzi character. They don't like her in part because she's marrying their brother, and their brother in a way is like a surrogate father to them because their father passed away. So he was like the head male person in their house, right? So he's kind of like a brother / pseudo father figure to them, and she's marrying him, and they're going to go off and start their own family, and there's like jealousy about that. But they also have professional jealousy towards her because she's really, really good at her job, but also she gets noticed by her superiors, and she gets singled out from other officers, and she gets promoted and stuff like that, and that makes them really angry. And there's lots of incredible dynamics of jealousy. And at one point, so Joyce Godenzi, if you don't know, she's half white. Her father's Australian, and she's half Hong Konger. And there's even like a scene where a character gets like racist towards her because they're so mad at her because of the professional dynamics that are happening in their personal lives. And that, I thought that was really interesting. And this movie dives so deeply into the lives of these characters and their personal relationships. And like, there's this really fascinating scene that to me, like you really don't expect to see in like a Hong Kong, even though this is a girls with guns film and it's a female led movie with lots of really great female characters. You don't often see like frank discussions of like sexuality, family planning, female perspectives on sexuality and stuff like that in Hong Kong action films from this period. You have this really amazing scene where the Tony Leung Ka-Fai character is like feeling a little randy and he wants to get a little nookie from the the Joyce Godenzi character, and she's like, we have already talked about this. We are not going to have a baby until I get promoted to superintendent, and then we can think about having a family and stuff like that. But right now we need to focus on our careers. And he's the only son in his family, right? And so he feels this great responsibility to have kids and carry on the family name and stuff like that. And she's like, you have to wear a condom if we're going to do it, right? And like, it's just this very good scene of like this frank discussion between husband and wife about their lives, their relationship, and their family planning. Now, this is where it's very Corey Yuen. They have this discussion. She goes to bed, and then he pokes a bunch of holes in the condom with a freaking sewing needle, right? So Corey Yuen is such an interesting filmmaker to me, excuse me, because his films are oftentimes, like if you look at Righting Wrongs, you look at Yes, Madam, these are character-driven films with really fascinating character dynamics with a big cast of characters who are each really individualized and really interesting and have their own desires and motivations, but they also have these really great relationships and group dynamics. His films tend to be very violent, cynical, brutal, and sad. And yet they also have, like, Yes, Madam has tons of really goofy slapstick humor in it, right? To me, that actually kind of takes me out of the movie. Yes, Madam is a classic film. I love that movie. I'm not trying to insult that movie. But the one thing that just doesn't work about that film for me is really the Choi Hart character and that kind of slapstick, over-the-top, goofy humor. It takes me out of the seriousness of the film. Righting Wrongs, excuse me, has this kind of exploitation film quality where it's really brutal and sad and tragic, but the action is very over the top. The kills are almost like borderline ridiculous sometimes because they're so violent, and you don't really have serious emotional character reactions to death and violence, which gives it this exploitation film kind of quality, right? And you do a little bit with like when the Wu Ma, you know, with the, okay, I don't want to spoil Righting Wrongs, but if you know the scene that I'm talking about, when the Wu Ma character kind of has like this little emotional breakdown. This movie really, really focuses on, it does have the goofy humor. But it's very minimized. It's just a couple scenes, and it does have some of the over the top action that feels like there's even one action sequence in this film where it's like, am I watching a Shaw Brothers movie? Like there's a guy using a bow and arrow, and they've got like logs falling from trees and like traps coming out of the ground. Like it really kind of, it takes you off guard because the action scenes in this movie are freaking amazing. There's an amazing like motorcycle and car chase. There's this amazing climactic action sequence on like a boat with like machete fighting and axes and people shooting and chains trying to choke each other, and like there's really tremendous action scenes throughout the whole thing. But there's this one like martial arts traps bow and arrow sequence where you're like, what is going on right now, right? This movie, I think, has far fewer elements that feel out of place to it than Yes, Madam or Righting Wrongs. And it dives much deeper into the character emotions and dynamics. And there's a lot of passages in this film that are really just focusing on relationships. And there's one scene in this film that while I was watching that scene was the point where I was like, this movie is freaking bananas incredible. And this scene is mind-blowing. And I don't want to spoil the context of the scene because it's like a big event that happens in the film, but I'm going to try to be vague about it. But there's a birthday party for the mom of this like family of cops, right? Who's like a big character in the film. And something really terrible happens to a couple of the characters just before the birthday party. So they go to the birthday party knowing something that no one else there knows. And there's this dramatic irony of like they have this really intense sadness and anxiety and like just tragedy that they've experienced within them, but they don't want to ruin the mom's birthday party. So they're trying to suppress it, and you can see it. The performances from Joyce Godenzi and Karina Lau in this movie are freaking incredible. Joyce Godenzi especially is so good in this movie. She handles the physical stuff so well, the fighting, the shooting, the motorcycle driving, but then her acting is so good. she has a very nuanced performance where there's scenes where she's really deep into the sadness and the crying and the tragedy of the events that are going on in the film. But then you see her anger, you see her desire for revenge, but then you see her kindness and her moral center. Another thing that this movie has in common with other Yuen films is that you see very good people who are operating within the confines of the law. Like you have Cynthia Rothrock and Michelle Yeoh in Yes, Madam. You have Cynthia Rothrock and Yuen Biu being a lawyer, Cynthia Rothrock being a cop and righting wrongs. Here you have this whole family of cops. They're good people who want to do the right thing, who want real justice. And the corruption and of the bureaucracy and the self-centeredness, career-oriented ambition and greed of people in positions of power within the justice system prevents people from getting actual justice. So they have to decide whether they're going to step outside the bounds of their job and the law in order to get what they believe to be real justice. And that creates a really interesting moral conflict at the center of the story. But if you are someone who is just like a junkie for action films, girls with guns movies, like if you loved the In the Line of Duty series, if you loved the Tiger Cage movies, if you like the Moon Lee movies like Devil Hunters and Iron Angels, Angel Enforcers, the Angel Terminators movies, like that kind of stuff, you will freaking love this movie because it has tons of action scenes, tons of fighting, but it gives you so much more than the typical kind of exploitation, shooting, fighting action film. The dynamics of the villain characters are really good too. So Yuen plays the leader of this group of villains. They're refugees from Vietnam. So this movie takes place in 1990. These characters, I would guess, are like in their 40s, right? So we know that they lived through the Vietnam War. They may have been soldiers. They probably experienced and witnessed horrible atrocities all around them for most of their lives. Maybe they've been trained to use weapons and they were soldiers or guerrillas or whatever. And now they've become refugees. Like there's no real mention of them having families. One of the characters is the sister of the Yuen character, but otherwise there's not really any sense that they have anyone else to care about other than each other, right? It kind of reminded me of Royal Warriors, the way you have this group of villains who are really terrible, but you understand their bond and why they're so important to each other and why they're willing to do anything for each other. So you have these villains who you really understand, even though you see that they're terrible, you understand why they're being terrible. What's really interesting is that in kind of the first half of the movie, the villains are a really solid, unified group. And there's a lot of fighting amongst the heroes because you have this dynamic of the sisters and the Joyce Godenzi character not really liking each other. And like the Sammo Hung character plays a police officer. He's a police officer too. And he's the godson of the father of the family who passed away. And he's kind of involved in these complicated dynamics too. And there's lots of infighting and disagreements. In the second half of the movie, the family finally starts to understand one another and starts to work together and to start mending the wounds and building bridges, right? Whereas with the bad guys, some of them are a little bit too... There's one in particular scene where one of the characters is like, you're going too far, to one of the other characters in the group of bad guys. And like, we need to pull back and value our lives more than we value this, like the violence and the greed and stuff like that. And so you start to see these shifting dynamics between the groups that informs kind of the rivalry between them and who is kind of on top and who has the upper hand. It's like the internal dynamics of the group impact how they are able to work in opposition to their nemesis or whatever. It's a really, really interesting dynamic. I'm just looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else that's... here's one thing that I wanted to mention, and then I can conclude my review here. There's in the interview with the professor from I can't remember her name, Valerie So. In her interview, she mentions certain aspects of this film that she thinks were added specifically to appeal to female audiences, and those were some of the aspects of the film that I thought were the most interesting and I liked the most. And it's really interesting to me to think that, like, what a producer might think, like, oh, we should add this because this is like typically more for women. And like you would put, like, a lot of this film plays like a drama. but it's a drama that has amazing, incredible action scenes in it, right? But it's like a family drama about sisters and women and family dynamics and like grandchildren and marriage and relationships, right? That to me is way more interesting than like the typical action hero bravado type of stuff. And so I think one of the things that makes this film so unique and to me so appealing and successful and incredible is that it's not like this one track mind. Okay, we're making an action movie. We just got to kill tons of people and have insane action nonsense. It's like, what if we did the crazy nonstop violent action, over the top stunts, car chases, shooting, fighting, killing, but we made a really interesting drama too. And I think films with that mindset, I'm not saying that like John Woo, for instance, obviously John Woo is not sitting there being like, how do we make this film appeal to women? And like, I don't think Ringo Lam was doing that either. But what the two of them did that I think makes them very unique filmmakers is that they made essentially character-based dramas in these worlds of violence and crime. And I think A Moment of Romance is another example of a film like that. Interestingly enough, I think the Skyhawk, you could argue Skyhawk is essentially a drama in a world of martial arts and crime. But this movie, She Shoots Straight, it's not any one thing, right? It's not easy to pigeonhole. Like, yes, it is a Girls with Guns movie, but like, is it more of a Girls with Guns movie or a drama? Because the drama drives so much of what the characters do and the events in the film. It's a really interesting movie to me because it's not typical in a way, I guess is maybe what I'm looking to say, of its era and genre. The movie that I would say it most reminded me of off the top of my head, other than obviously bearing a lot of similarities and resemblance to other Korean films, is Royal Warriors, because Royal Warriors is a really, really good character piece with really three-dimensional villains, with really great family and character dynamics, that is also a Girls with Guns action film. So the movie is She Shoots Straight. I cannot overemphasize how much I freaking love this movie. It is so good. If you haven't ordered it and you have the money for it, and buy it right now. Watch it otherwise. If you're not sure if you can afford the release or whatever, find it on streaming, rent it, whatever. It's just so good. And I'm so happy that I was able to see this film, that it exists in this incredible presentation with this bonus material, with all the bells and whistles. My name is Will. You're watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society, and we will see you next time.